Ah, my dear friends, gather around the fire because tonight I'm going to tell you about two great empires that flickered and shone in the dark sky for centuries: Byzantium and the Ottoman Empire. This story is one that has captivated countless people over the years. It still echoes in the minds of historians with questions, admiration, and even a bit of disbelief. The struggle I'm about to share isn't just about two powers vying for land, it's also a clash of beliefs, cultures, and different worldviews. You see, not too long ago, the Roman Empire ruled everywhere. Vast territories stretched to the west, while bustling cities shifted to the east. But no empire lasts forever. As the Western Roman Empire fell, the Byzantine Empire rose, a new empire born from the ashes of a civilization. You should have seen that magnificent Hagia Sophia, its gold-decorated mosaics, and the thick walls protecting the city. Byzantium was so rich and powerful that it pushed back countless armies that sought to destroy it for centuries. But friends, just like everywhere else in the world, a new power was emerging here: the Ottomans. This tribe, sweeping across the battlefield like the wind, never stood still, always setting its sights on moving further and facing even stronger rivals. The Turkish tribes, united under the Ottoman banner in Anatolia, set their eyes on the dazzling wealth of Byzantium. Osman Bey, Orhan Bey, and finally Fatih Sultan Mehmed. Each of them burned with the desire to end Byzantium's rule in these lands. This tale I'm about to tell is the story of the end of one civilization and the birth of another. Today I'll share this epic that has been passed down through generations with all its details. If you're ready, take a deep breath, because we're about to sail into the most tumultuous waters of history. Welcome to the final struggles between Byzantium and the Ottomans. All right, now we're taking a step back into the depths of history. The roots of these two empires branch out like the limbs of a growing tree, but fate inevitably brings them face to face at some point. Byzantium, known as the mighty heir of Rome. But you know, no tree can stand forever the same. Its branches break, and its leaves fall. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Byzantium remained on the historical stage under the name of the Eastern Roman Empire. It saw itself as the true successor of Rome. In the gold-adorned palaces of Istanbul, in the grand churches decorated with mosaics, and in the elegant streets where this empire once established the world order, it survived for many years. However, time was presenting its own tough tests to Byzantium. They faced betrayal from within while trying to withstand the sieges of crusader armies, rebellions, and pandemics from the outside. And with each challenge, they became a bit weaker. That once great power that controlled the Mediterranean, Anatolia, and the Middle East gradually lost its influence. Its lands slipped away, and its allies dwindled. Behind the majestic walls that reminded them of their former glory, a weakened Byzantium was all that remained. Meanwhile, a new power was rising from the heart of Anatolia: the Ottomans. Starting as a small principality, the Ottomans grew like a wind across vast pastures, caravan routes, and battlefields. This state, founded by Osman Bey and Orhan Bey, drew strength from the Seljuk legacy, blending it with their own traditions. Facing a weakened Byzantium, the Ottomans expanded into every territory they conquered. They took root like a sturdy tree. Imagine that the Ottomans gradually reached the outskirts of Byzantium. They were now challenging the great empire under whose shadow they once grew. The intelligence of Kanderli Halil Pasha, the determination of Murad Hudavendigar, the bravery of Yildirim Bayezid. All these leaders reinforced the Ottoman strength against Byzantium. In the eyes of the Ottomans, Byzantium represented a decaying structure nearing the end of its era. Their rising star from the east was ready to overshadow this aging empire in the west. This imbalance of power would turn into the beginning of an end for both empires. One side shined with its golden mosaics, while the other advanced boldly with its brave raiders. Every battle lost by Byzantium brought the Ottomans closer to each victory they achieved. And so, dear friends, these two great civilizations from different worlds were moving closer together, heading toward this unforgettable final struggle in history. Gather round the fire, because we still have a lot more to share in this story. Istanbul. It's a city where the land is as precious as gold and its waters flow with history. Once known as the glorious city of Constantinople, it's the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire and one of the most strategic locations in world history. The walls of Istanbul shine like a treasure, having adorned the dreams of countless rulers for centuries. But what makes this city special isn't just its beauty. It sits at the crossroads of trade routes that stretch from east to west and north to south. It's the only gateway from the turbulent waters of the Black Sea to the warm shores of the Mediterranean. With its straits, it connects both Eastern and Western civilizations, serving as a passageway for traders, travelers, and armies. But dear friends, what makes Istanbul special isn't just its geography. The city represents not only the heart of an empire but also its soul. For the Eastern Roman Empire, Istanbul was not just a capital, it was a sacred center that stood strong by the grace of God. It is considered as holy as the crucifixion of Jesus, where believers under the magnificent dome of Hagia Sophia felt a little closer to heaven. The city is a temple where emperors were crowned, sacred ceremonies were held, and patriarchs worshipped. Every stone and column carries a trace of Byzantium's glorious history. Even if an empire falls, this city radiates a power that makes it seem as if it will stand tall forever. But for the Ottomans, this city held a different kind of significance. For the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul was a dream, a symbol. It was even the key to the future. For Osman Gazi, Orhan Gazi, and the Ottoman rulers who followed them, Istanbul was the most sacred star of the crescent. It was a goal etched into the heart of the Ottoman Empire, a treasure waiting to be taken, but one that needed to be approached with respect. If this city were captured, the Ottomans could rule both East and West, becoming a center of power in the Islamic world and dominating the most coveted lands of the West. That's why the Ottoman sultans prayed for the conquest of Istanbul, raised their soldiers with this dream, and aimed to get one step closer to those ancient walls with every campaign. The strategic importance of Istanbul isn't limited to its military or commercial value. It's also a spiritual symbol. It's at the meeting point of East and West, of the Islamic and Christian worlds. Here, as Byzantium breathes its last, the birth of the Ottoman Empire will take place. For hundreds of years, this city has been a bridge between two empires, living both friendship and enmity, and now it sits right at the heart of both sides. If Istanbul falls, Byzantium will fall. If Istanbul is taken, the Ottomans will rule the world. So, dear friends, there will be battles fought, lives given, and victories won for this ancient city. Close your eyes and imagine on one side, churches dedicated to Jesus, on the other, the fantasy of minarets reaching for the sky. Are you ready to witness history in this epic struggle of Istanbul? Because we still have a lot more to share. When young Sultan Mehmed ascended the throne, he was barely in his early 20s. Yet the power within him was strong enough to challenge the mightiest rulers. For those who remembered the heavy defeat of his grandfather, Yildirim Bayezid, and the tumultuous times his father Murad faced while leading the state, the young sultan's rise brought about mixed emotions. He might have looked too young for the throne, but anyone who saw the determination in his eyes could instantly tell he wasn't just an ordinary ruler. Even on his first days on the throne, if you had heard what he confidently declared to those around him, you would have felt the fire of conquest burning inside him. Yes, Sultan Mehmed was not just a throne lover, he was a dreamer, passionate about taking Istanbul. Take a deep breath, my friends, because this young sultan viewed conquering Istanbul as more than just a dream. It was a matter of faith. Of course, previous Ottoman rulers had desired the conquest of Istanbul, but none had thought it was inevitable like Mehmed did. As soon as he came to power, Mehmed aligned his strategies accordingly. He proclaimed, "The Ottoman rule will not be complete until Istanbul is taken," and there was a great truth behind those words. Because the conquest of Istanbul wouldn't just determine the fate of the Ottoman Empire, it would also elevate the honor of the entire Islamic world and open the doors of East and West wide open for the Ottomans. Young Mehmed was a sultan who loved wisdom and knowledge. From a young age, he had been educated in various scientific fields, studying history and learning languages. He was well versed in Greek, Persian, and Arabic, and had a broad knowledge base from mathematics to astronomy. He knew how to act wisely and seize the right moment. His father, Murad, had passed this knowledge down to him. Despite his youth, Mehmed was patient, thoughtful, and incredibly daring. For him, the throne wasn't just an inheritance, it was the key to opening a new door in world history. He began to work meticulously on how to take Istanbul. He carefully evaluated how to breach the walls and assess the situations both inside and outside of Byzantium. During the siege, he considered every detail he would need, planning step by step like a master strategist. For him, Istanbul wasn't just a city, it was a test of faith. Every time he heard the famous saying of the Prophet, his desire grew stronger: Istanbul will surely be conquered. What a fine commander he is who conquers it, and what a fine soldier he is who takes it. Mehmed was a sultan who believed in the power of these words and chose this blessed cause as his roadmap. Now that he sat on the throne, it was time to confront history. Mehmed would claim this great legacy as both a descendant of the Ottoman dynasty and a future conqueror. Conquering Istanbul, his childhood dream, now depended on the determination and courage of a young sultan. He felt ready for this conquest that would not only elevate the Ottomans, but also change the course of history. Sitting on the throne, he understood he had committed himself to this path now. All that filled his heart was the fire of conquest, and in his soul burned the desire to challenge history. And so the story of the young sultan began here, with his first steps. Now you see young Mehmet sitting on the Ottoman throne. In his mind there's a massive map, and in his heart, a dream of Istanbul. That dream wakes him up to a new day every morning and sends him to sleep each night with a new plan for conquest. Ever since he took the throne, he meticulously planned the preparations he needed to make for the siege. After all, the walls of Istanbul were so strong that many rulers had bowed before them, and their armies had returned exhausted. But Mehmet believed these mighty walls would surrender, not to just anyone, but to the most powerful young sultan of the Ottomans. But this was no easy task. The walls of Istanbul reflected thousands of years of Byzantine defensive experience. The Eastern Roman Empire had one of the most solid and difficult-to-cross defenses of its time. These walls consisted of 3 layers, wrapping the city like armor. Mehmet knew that breaking or climbing over those walls was nearly impossible, so he reviewed every detail like a wise strategist. If he wanted to breach the walls, he would need to strike with incredible force, from both land and sea. That's why he made pre-siege preparations like a work of art, placing each stone with great care. His first step was to begin the construction of Rumeli Fortress. This fortress would be built on the northern side of the strait, at the entrance to the Black Sea. This way, all aid coming to Byzantium would be cut off. Mehmet mobilized hundreds of workers for the construction of the fortress. It was such a strategic location that every soldier coming to help Byzantium would see its walls amid the strait's currents and feel the might of the Ottomans. Mehmet's plan was to trap Istanbul like a vice, restricting Byzantine movement from all sides. But that wasn't enough, was it? Because young Mehmet needed the power to breach those walls. At this point, he enlisted the help of a brilliant engineer named Urban. Urban was a skilled master who could create enormous cannons. When Mehmet told him, "Make a cannon that will break these walls," Urban designed a cannon so powerful that when it fired, its sound would soar to the heavens and strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. Urban's cannons were engineering marvels of their time. They could launch stone projectiles nearly 700 meters away, and the booming sound of each projectile hitting the walls would ignite a fire of fear among the people of Istanbul when the siege began. Mehmet placed these cannons with great care, positioning them to face the strongest walls of Byzantium. Mehmet relied not just on the power of his weapons, but also on his tactical intelligence. All preparations for the Ottoman siege by land and sea had been made. He knew they would chain the Golden Horn, but Mehmet also had a plan to get past that chain. And when all the preparations were finally complete, that young sultan didn't hesitate for a moment to take the final step for the siege. Before him stood the Byzantine walls, and in his heart was a faith that would leave a mark on history. The great siege was now ready to begin. Young Mehmet was getting closer to his dream step by step, while the Ottoman army was eager to write one of the greatest epics in history. We've reached one of the most painful yet powerful chapters of our story, the tale of Xi. Constantine, the last emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium. It's important to remember that he wasn't just sitting on a throne, he was a leader whose heart was on fire, beating for the fate of Byzantium. As he prepared for the massive siege, he didn't underestimate the strength of young Mehmet and the might of the Ottomans. He knew that the walls of Istanbul had protected the empire for centuries, but this time he was aware that the incoming threat was unlike any attack he had faced before. Constantine had come to the throne during one of the toughest times for Byzantium. The Ottomans had gradually expanded and surrounded him. He felt the pressure of young Sultan Mehmed knocking on his door with the full force of the Ottoman Empire. But he was determined to defend Istanbul with everything he had. He wasn't just an emperor, he was a beleaguered but brave defender. He did everything he could to reinforce the city's walls. Although his troops were few and supplies were limited, he was still rallying his people and soldiers for the battle ahead. All around the city, preparations were in full swing. Constantine was holding meetings with army commanders late into the night, strategizing and planning. At the same time, he was trying to keep the morale of the people high. It was tough for him to see the fear gripping the citizens as the Ottomans drew closer, but he organized services in churches to inspire hope and encourage people to pray for strength. These services were perhaps the last echoes of the Eastern Roman Empire. The prayers uttered by the people, kneeling in earnest, rose to the heavens, carrying with them the final hopes for the empire's future. Constantine would often climb the walls, talking to his soldiers one-on-one, looking them in the eye, speaking not as a leader but like a father. In his eyes there was more pride defying history than fear. Byzantium has stood for centuries behind these walls, he would say to them, and we will protect this city until our last breath, no matter what. But no matter how determined he was, Constantine was aware of the massive cannons in the hands of the Ottomans. He knew that the Rumeli fortress had risen in the Bosphorus, cutting off all support, and he felt the Ottoman army getting closer with each passing day. In his eyes, Mehmet was a formidable danger and an inevitable force. However, even though he admired the young sultan's strength, he wouldn't allow that fear to shake his faith. Constantine's greatest strength was standing before his people and army, inspiring them with belief. Istanbul was now in a silence before the storm. The ancient city behind its walls was about to face its toughest challenge in history. Constantine kept his faith until the very end. Perhaps this belief was the last breath of Byzantium stretching through the centuries. Every morning he would take a hopeful stroll along the walls, scanning the city in every direction. He believed that the very walls that had kept Byzantium standing throughout history were now resisting just as stubbornly as he was. And so Constantine was ready for the final battle. Perhaps history had never seen a defender so honorable as him. Yes, the last struggle of an emperor was about to begin, but the true strength of that struggle lay in Constantine's heart, his faith, and his loyalty to his city. With this determination and belief, Byzantium would stand against the massive waves of the Ottomans. The big day had finally arrived behind the walls. Hearts were racing, and eyes were fixed on every corner of Istanbul, with everyone holding their breath. The battle, which would rise from the dark depths of history and be reborn in the light, had begun. Young Sultan Mehmed II had lit the fuse for the siege after days of preparation. As the Ottoman army, with its enormous might, gradually advanced towards Istanbul, the silence was replaced by the battle cries of war. The eyes of the Ottoman soldiers, standing before the Byzantine walls, sparkled with a determination unlike anything seen before, united in their sultan's belief in victory. The first clashes began with sounds resembling thunder from the siege cannons. The massive cannons brought by the Ottomans, the most terrifying weapons of the armies, were positioned and began to strike like a hammer. They were so powerful that each cannonball felt like a deafening scream echoing against the Byzantine walls. The clouds of dust and debris rising from the walls would challenge Byzantine resistance throughout the siege. With every explosion of the Ottoman cannons, the people of Byzantium fell into deep fear. Yet Constantinos and his soldiers were determined to stand firm against the attack. To boost his troops' morale, Constantinos roamed the walls, personally visiting the wounded. He was exploring every possible way to resist the immense power of the Ottomans. The blacksmiths in the city worked tirelessly to patch up the damage to the walls, no matter how long it took. Every Byzantine soldier faced the blasts of Ottoman cannons defiantly. Even though the cannonballs were causing great damage to the walls, the Byzantine people and their army stood their ground, refusing to take a step back with each explosion. For them, this was not just a city, it was the fortress of a centuries-old civilization. Meanwhile, the Ottoman army was attacking not only with cannons but also with waves of infantry. The first Ottoman troops preparing to breach the walls faced the skilled archers and boiling oil of Byzantium. As each Ottoman soldier lunged towards the walls, a ring of fire formed in the Byzantine defense line. However, the Ottomans did not waver. Mehmed's military strategies were meticulous, and every phase of the siege was unfolding perfectly. In the initial clashes, the struggle of the Byzantine soldiers was so fierce and fearless that even the Ottoman army respected their resistance. Sultan Mehmed designed the first assaults as a test to evaluate the wall's durability. Constantino's soldiers stood like a forest before their enemies, resisting the Ottomans' immense power like solid rock. As the Ottoman army launched waves of attacks, the Byzantine soldiers faced each of their enemies like heroes, standing firm on every stone. As days passed, the attacks grew more intense, and the battles became bloodier. The Ottomans' colossal cannons continued to rain blows upon Istanbul's walls, and the Byzantine defenses persisted. However, Mehmed's plans were relentless. This young sultan seemed to devise a new strategy after every strike and clash. As the siege intensified day by day, both empires faced each other with unyielding willpower. This was a struggle not just for a city, but for the fate of two great civilizations. Ah, the Golden Horn. Those legendary waters that stretch out like a protective shield, guarding the two empires against each other right in the heart of Istanbul. This was one of the most crucial defense points for the Byzantines to stop the Ottoman advance. The city walls of Istanbul were strong, but one of the key elements keeping the city safe was the cold, steel-like waters of the Golden Horn. The Byzantines had stretched a massive chain across the Golden Horn to prevent the Ottoman fleet from entering. One end was tightly secured to Galata, while the other was anchored to the Byzantine shores. This chain wasn't just a regular defense measure. It was one of the most fascinating defenses in history and served as a steel wall for the security of the Golden Horn. Each link represented the reassurance of the Byzantine Empire. Even though the Ottoman navy was powerful and numerically superior, it couldn't penetrate the waters of the Golden Horn due to that chain and the rocky waters. For young Sultan Mehmed, this was a new test he had to overcome. To him, the Golden Horn was a formidable barrier on his path to conquest, but at the same time, the key to victory lay there in those waters. The Byzantines looked at the Golden Horn with great confidence. While the city walls held against the siege, the Golden Horn also blocked the Ottoman fleet. However, Sultan Mehmed wasn't standing still, he was thinking up new strategies. For the Byzantines, the Golden Horn was more than just a defensive line, it was also the last bastion where fresh supplies and reinforcements came from. Therefore, the Ottoman access to the Golden Horn would create a significant breach in the Byzantine defenses. Mehmed was searching for a way to overcome that defensive wall, which stood behind the chains and across the water. As the days went by, the Byzantine resistance showed no signs of breaking. In fact, a sense of hope was blossoming among the people and soldiers in the city. The belief that the Golden Horn would remain closed off by those giant chains and that the Ottomans wouldn't reach it became a morale booster for those behind the walls. But Sultan Mehmed had different plans. He wouldn't just settle for overcoming the walls, he would break the chains of the Golden Horn as well. To him, this city symbolized a victory he had set his mind on, and he had no intention of stepping back. Then one day, unusual activity started in the Ottoman army. Sultan Mehmed had come up with a plan that would blow everyone's minds. He was going to bring his fleet into the Golden Horn from a place the enemy wouldn't expect. They would slide those massive ships across the land, on top of huge tree trunks, and bring them into the Golden Horn. Yes, they were going to move the ships overland. Neither the Byzantines expected this, nor had anything like it been heard of in history before. When the soldiers who thought the Golden Horn was safe woke up that morning to see the Ottoman fleet on its waters, a wave of unprecedented shock swept across the city. Just like that, the significance of that great chain and the entire defense system of the Golden Horn lost its meaning in an instant. The Ottoman fleet was now in the Golden Horn, and the inevitable end for the Byzantines was drawing near. Now let me take you to those dark and fateful moments in history. Close your eyes and travel back to the spring mornings of 1453. On that morning, the city's walls were waiting in silence. Istanbul, the last stronghold of Byzantium, the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. This great city, standing for thousands of years, was preparing for its final stand. Inside, the weary eyes of Emperor Constantine XI were looking toward a hope, a miracle. And outside, the eyes of Sultan Mehmed II were watching for that great victory that would mark history. It was May 29th. The air was still cool, and the massive Ottoman army in front of the walls was quietly restless. Despite his young age, Sultan Mehmed was preparing to bring down one of history's greatest empires with his brilliance and determination. In the days leading up to this, the city had been under constant cannon fire, and with each blow the walls were crumbling more and more. The Ottoman cannons were the most advanced weapons of their time. Their blasts were so powerful that no previous siege had been this shocking. Every crack and every destruction in the walls meant that hope was fading a little more for Byzantium. Yet Constantine and his soldiers were determined to resist with all their might. On the morning of that great day, the final assault command was given to the Ottoman army. Every point of the city was under siege at once. Turkish soldiers were climbing the walls like a wave, coming face to face with death. In those moments, the shouts of Allah rising from the Ottoman soldiers filled the city. This was not just a conquest, it was a battle of faith. The Ottoman army was putting everything on the line under Mehmed's banner to capture the city. That day was the moment when everything broke. The Byzantine defense line was weakening rapidly, and the walls were becoming unable to withstand the weight of the Ottoman soldiers. As the Ottomans began to push against the walls one last time, the tension inside the city was almost palpable. When the Ottoman soldiers reached the top of the walls, chaos erupted within the city. People were at a loss for what to do. Some were seeking refuge in churches, while others were considering surrendering. But the Emperor, Constantine XI, he did not abandon the city. History would record not his escape, but his fight until the very end. And finally, that unforgettable moment arrived. May 29th, 1453, the fall of Istanbul. The city was now in the hands of the Ottomans. Sultan Mehmed would be known throughout history as the conqueror, and this victory would remain one of the greatest achievements of the Ottoman Empire. The last ruler of the Byzantine Empire, Constantine XI, lost his life fighting among his people like an ordinary soldier. Some say he disappeared into the depths of the Bosphorus at that moment, but most historians believe he died by the sword of his enemies. The empire came to an end, but the emperor was etched into the golden pages of history with his honor and bravery. The fall of Istanbul marked the end of an era. Byzantium, a 1,000-year-old empire, was buried in history. However, this fall opened the doors to a new era, the golden age of the Ottomans. Istanbul had now become a Turkish city, an Islamic capital. The streets were filled with the footsteps of Ottoman soldiers, and churches were being turned into mosques. But that day wasn't just a city that was changing, it was history itself. The Ottomans were becoming an even greater power on the world stage at the intersection of East and West. So, my dear friend, that's how the fall of Istanbul unfolded. The last stand in front of the walls was the final struggles of an empire. And those last moments will never be forgotten throughout history. Ah, yes. After the fall of Istanbul, the course of history didn't just stop, it took a completely different path. The Ottomans opened the doors of Istanbul, but the real challenge was how to transform this great city into the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Conquest wasn't just about tearing down the walls. It was the birth of a new empire from the ashes of a civilization. And of course, behind this great transformation was the vision of the young Sultan Mehmed. Just think about it. Sultan Mehmed II was only 21 years old, but he had the spirit of a great leader within him. Istanbul was now his city, and it would take shape in his hands. The conqueror of the city, Mehmed, would achieve his true victory by rebuilding Istanbul. Because Mehmed wasn't just a warrior, he was a statesman, a visionary. As he took his first steps after the conquest, he respected the city's historical heritage, while also nurturing the grand imperial plans of the Ottomans within this city. Istanbul, beyond being the capital of ancient Byzantium, was now going to be the heart of the Ottoman Empire. The conqueror immediately rolled up his sleeves to reorganize the city from top to bottom. Istanbul was going to be reborn as the capital of the Ottomans. He started by repairing the damaged areas of the city. The Ottomans hadn't caused much destruction while taking the city, but centuries of wars and sieges had left many parts of it in ruins. Mehmed was determined to build a new civilization on these ruins. The mosques, madrasas, and bazaars of Istanbul. All of these were pieces of Mehmed's grand vision. While establishing the Islamic identity of the Ottomans in this city, he also aimed to preserve Istanbul's cultural diversity. He wanted to create a symbol of tolerance and unity by settling Christians, Jews, and of course Muslims in the city. The old Byzantine churches were gradually transformed into mosques, but in this transformation, the old structures were preserved to respect the city's historical heritage. Hagia Sophia, that great church, had now become one of the most important mosques of the Ottomans. However, this transformation should be seen as a new birth rather than a destruction. Sultan Mehmed didn't just focus on religious structures in the city. He commissioned the construction of new roads, aqueducts, and bridges. Istanbul was going to be the center of trade, science, and art. The grand bazaars, madrasas, and mosques built in the center of Istanbul contributed to the city becoming the jewel of the Ottomans. And of course, the Grand Bazaar. One of the oldest and largest covered bazaars in the world was established during that time. Here, merchants and artisans from all over the world would trade goods, and this bazaar would become the heart of the Ottoman economy. Sultan Mehmed didn't just conquer a city, he laid the foundations for a new cultural and political order. In a short time, the city attained all the splendor of being the capital of the Ottoman Empire. There was a plan with every step, and a vision at every corner. Mehmed rebuilt the city not only physically but also mentally. A system where justice, tolerance, and culture reigned was established in the city. After the conquest, Istanbul became the center of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed took the first steps toward making the empire a great world power right there. He wanted to create a capital that would elevate the Ottomans, not only militarily but also culturally and politically. The conquest had changed the fate of the Ottoman Empire. Istanbul was now a Turkish city. Every step taken in this city shaped the future of the empire, and Sultan Mehmed II secured his place in history as the architect of that future. Istanbul was no longer just a city, it was a symbol of a civilization. The heart of the Ottomans would beat here, and visions that would rule the world would be born in this city. Thus, Sultan Mehmed's grand vision after the conquest transformed Istanbul into one of the most important cities in history. These moments, which were turning points in history, weren't limited to just a conquest. They represented the changes of civilizations. And dear friend, as we watch the formation of Istanbul as a new world center with the first steps of the Ottomans, the flow of history changed once again. Ah, my friend, the conquest of Istanbul wasn't just a military victory, it was a turning point that changed the course of world history. You can see the ripple effects of this victory in both cultural and political spheres. The conquest didn't just expand the borders of the Ottoman Empire, it also symbolized its emergence as a global power. In the halls, palaces, and churches of Europe, a name was now whispered: Sultan Mehmed, the Conqueror. Just imagine the conquest. On that day, May 29th, 1453, when the walls fell, it wasn't just stones that crumbled, it marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. When the Western world received the news, there was deep shock. Up until then, Istanbul was the eastern bastion of the Christian world, the last remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire, and now it was in Ottoman hands. Europe would feel the repercussions of this event for many years to come. The conquest created great fear and confusion in Europe. The Ottomans were now at the gates. Many were afraid that the Ottomans would quickly spread into the heart of Europe. From the Pope to kings, everyone understood the significance of this great victory. The conquest demonstrated that the Ottomans were an unstoppable force. European leaders realized that the Ottoman Empire, empowered by this new capital, would become even more dangerous. Culturally, the conquest of Istanbul built a bridge between civilizations. A new balance was being established between East and West, between the Islamic world and the Christian world. The Ottomans inherited the legacy of the Eastern Romans and rebuilt this ancient city. This process had significant cultural effects on Europe as well. Trade routes, science, and art began to reshape. The cultural changes taking place on the former Byzantine lands inevitably coincided with the rise of the Ottoman Empire. With this victory of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, the Ottomans became a cultural power center as well as a military one. Istanbul became the capital of Islam and Ottoman civilization, while the Western world started to feel the effects of this new era. European thinkers, writers, and travelers were in awe of this new Istanbul. The advancements of the Ottomans in art and science sparked great admiration and curiosity in the West. Especially during the Renaissance, Momentum picked up following the conquest of Istanbul as scholars fleeing from Byzantium brought knowledge to Europe. They sparked a new enlightenment in the West's scientific and cultural landscape. Politically, this conquest symbolized the beginning of Ottoman strategies towards the West. The Ottomans were now a direct part of Europe. They solidified their presence in the Balkans and laid the groundwork for a path that would reach the gates of Vienna. In this new era, the Ottomans became not just an Eastern power, but also an empire that would determine the fate of the West. The conquest also illustrated how the Ottomans would navigate global politics. Mehmed was more than just a conqueror, he was a statesman. He approached the West not only with a sword but also with diplomacy and strategy. His balanced relationships with kingdoms, city-states, and even the papacy helped the Ottomans remain a strong actor on the European stage. Dear friend, this is how it was. The conquest of Istanbul was not just the capture of a city, it was an event that changed the direction of civilizations. This victory brought the Ottomans onto the world stage, shifted the balance of the West, and reshaped the flow of history forever. Sultan Mehmed's grand vision elevated the Ottoman Empire to greatness and turned it into one of the greatest empires in world history. Ah, my friends. And so we've reached the end of an era. We lived through those great days when the glorious thousand-year history of Byzantium faded into dusty pages, marking the rise of the Ottoman Empire and the shift of history into a new direction. The conquest of Istanbul was not just about capturing a city, it was about steering history onto an entirely different path. The vision, courage, and strategic moves of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror buried the last remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire in history. But you know, history isn't just about victories. The passions, dreams, struggles, losses, and hopes of people are hidden in every line of this epic. The brave resistance of Constantine XI, the faith his people had in him, and his relentless efforts until the very end should never be forgotten. Just like the extraordinary determination shown by Sultan Mehmed despite his young age. Now take a deep breath, close your eyes, and feel the traces of history once again. Cities rise, empires are built and fall, but lessons, stories, and humanity always remain behind. Istanbul was a great city back then, and it stands strong as a great city today. But remember, every stone, every street, and every palace has a story, and as these stories are told, the spirit of the past continues to live on. So, dear friends, we've shared a glimpse from the depths of history with you. We've come to the end of this grand epic, but history is always filled with new stories waiting to be told. Remember, every ending is a sign of a new beginning. The whispers of the past reach the ears of today and remind us of how deep, rich, and complex humanity really is. If you'd like to explore more of this fascinating world of history, let's meet again on our next journey. History is always shrouded in mystery, but as we peek behind that curtain, we learn even more. Rest well, clear your minds, and until we meet again for the next story, may you dream of echoes of history. Until the next tale, take care.